So, about a year ago, maybe over a year ago, I started with this article that you see on the screen. Let's defrag your brain with a SparkFile article that I wrote according to the date on it, all the way back in 2012. So 10 years ago, I wrote this thing for Lifehacker. And it's gotten like a zillion views. It's probably one of the most widely read thing I've ever written. And there's two problems. One is Lifehacker, as many like huge blogs of its day, has sadly gotten what I like to call ad cancer. In that even if I have an ad blocker, if you can believe it, and there's still just like so much crap that shows up and just breaks up this page. It's not good. Actually, most of the ads are being blocked now. But so I don't like sending people to this link because this page is just covered in ads. Also, upon reread, it's not very good. It's good, and we'll get into like the ideas are good, but you know, in 10 years, I've gotten a little better at writing, and I look back at it and I go, this is not up to par. So, like I said, about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago, I sat down on stream, I grabbed all the text out of this, put it into a text file, and started editing and rewriting and all of that jazz. And you can find that on the Stacking the Bricks. Is this gonna work? Maybe, possibly? Yeah, so actually, yeah, a year ago, I had two streams on this. If you search for how to have great ideas on the Stacking the Bricks channel. Yo, what's up, Nick? Glad to see you here. And there's actually a whole bunch of folks hanging out. If you have not said hello, would love to see you in the chat. So yeah, so as you can see, I've probably got, I don't know what, just shy of 3 hours into editing. And you know, around this time last year, I think we were all pretty exhausted. This was before we could get vaccinated, and you know, I loved doing the stream, but I just didn't have it in me. Fast forward to the eve of March 2022, since that is happening in a few days somehow. I'm feeling a lot better for a lot of reasons. So I'm really, really glad for that. And I've been kind of unearthing some things that I put on the shelf. And this particular article has come up a bunch in conversations recently, and I was like, you know what? I think it's time. And I was just gonna sit down and work on it by my lonesome. And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is a good opportunity to rekindle the stream. Because I think for me, these writing streams was, you know, I guess there's two parts to it, right? One is I get to like invite you into my writing process, which I hope is good for you, or at least interesting, you know, useful, entertaining, whatever. It's good for me too. I think one of the hardest parts about writing is the thinking part. I've heard people say, and I agree, that writing is the hardest version of thinking. And that's true, because it forces you to actually like organize your thoughts and like interrogate them and make them cohesive. But it's also a thing that we're like, a lot of writing actually happens in our head. Like the words hitting the page is kind of the last part. And it's really hard to go from thoughts in here to thoughts on there. And I feel like talking it out with you is actually really helpful for me. So I am excited to get into this. Now, I did do a little bit of prep work. I clearly didn't test my microphone, but I did do a little bit of other prep work in that. So also, since I streamed last, I've got some new tools in my tool chain. I've become a Notion convert. I'm one of those people now. And so I've realized that I really like drafting in Notion, mostly because it keeps me from over playing with the formatting and layout. It's just enough formatting to make things like neat and tidy. It's also because we publish with a static site generator, it spits out Markdown, which makes the final push pretty easy. So I moved everything from, I think before I was actually apparently composing like in Markdown in a text editor, which again, I look back and I go, I was making things hard on myself. So I moved everything over here. You know, I chucked my front matter, a little bit that it was, in a toggle, and I pulled out some of the like messier formatting and stuff like that. I just like laid out the basics here in this doc, and I thought, I skimmed it. I didn't actually read this yet, so I'm revisiting this. This is like blind react to past me, editing extreme past me. This is very self-referential. So I'm looking at this pretty fresh myself, which was kind of what I wanted to do on stream as well. So we'll kind of cruise through this, but I did notice, and I put in a call out down here, I had left some notes for myself. This is another one of those, like, I don't know exactly when I picked up this habit, but a lot of my writing doesn't happen in one session. I'd argue basically none of it does. So when I'm like setting something down, whether it's for tomorrow or in this case next year, I didn't know then. I clearly had some thought of like where this could go next, and I did future me, now present me, a favor, and I wrote down some stuff including show screenshots, focus on the review process, maybe an example, why to keep Spark files separate from other note-taking tools, and homework. And surprising to me, all of these make sense without even having really reread the rest of the article. So that's good news. And then it appears that what is left down below that set of notes is maybe a bit of the old art. Oh, no, sorry, that's right, this is the scratch. There is a little bit more. I think this is from the original Lifehack article, which I'm gonna get rid of. So, let's start. I don't know, chat, what do you think? I'm just gonna read this. I'm gonna read it out loud. It feels a little silly to read you something that you can see, but I guess that's the medium that we're working in here, right? So I'm gonna read and I'll probably pause here and there and share some thoughts as I go. So the first time I told my friend Tony about using a Spark file for my unfinished ideas, it was early 2013. Quote, Alex, this process is amazing. It sounds like defragging your brain. So my 90s nerds and everybody else, this technique works across generations. Let's talk about the Spark file technique, and by the end of this article, you'll know how to turn your half-baked ideas into great ideas. Quick pause. This intro is okay. I would venture to say that it is better than, it is better than the Lifehacker one. Like, the Lifehacker one had this intro, which is actually like probably what I was trying to channel. And then I jump into this, like, Stephen Johnson is one of my favorite authors, and this is where the writing, I'm like, this is not, it's like, it's fine, but it's just not good writing. So I venture to say, like, what I was trying to do is, like, bring people into a story, but this, unless you care about who Tony is, like, the closest thing to a thing to relate to probably here is unfinished ideas. So I want to tap into that, but I feel like there's like a missing preamble to this, and I have a theory, and I was tweeting about this when part of why I wanted to reconnect with this writing. I was having drinks with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me, do you use like a Zettelkasten? I think because I told him that we were using Notion for a bunch of documentation. He goes, do you do Zettelkasten? And I was like, no, not really. Like, I know what it is. I've read some about it. I always feel like I don't quite get it. Like, I get it conceptually, but it doesn't quite match the way my brain works. And I described what I do instead, which is the Spark file technique that we'll dig into in just a minute. And I described this, and he goes, oh, this is way better than Zettelkast. And so knowing that Zettelkasten is like a thing in the zeitgeist, and that it's like an approach to like personal knowledge management, note-taking, stuff like that, I think I want to tap into that now. That seems like a smart thing to do in terms of like, my goal is not to like tear down people who do Zettelkasten and like it and it works for them. Like, you do you. But when I tweeted about this last night, I got a message, a reply from Andrew Skotsko, who, is that what it was? I think it was. Who basically said, you know, I'm interested in this because I've tried Zettelkasten a bunch of times and it's never quite worked. Yeah, he says, being a Zettelkasten nerd, in theory, but failed in practice. Aha, that's the key. Andrew said he's keen to see this approach. So I think that's the thing with Zettelkasten is I think people love the theory, but in practice, it's almost too hard. And I think the Spark file is much easier. It's much easier to build as a habit, and it requires way less. Like, I think Zettelkasten and a lot of the personal knowledge management stuff in general is good for people who get some joy out of the process of like gardening their notes and like linking them and tidying them and all those kinds of things. And I completely get that, but also know that that is absolutely not me. I want stuff to go in with as little friction as possible, and I don't want to be spending time like reorganizing my notes. That's not the point. I want my notes to be there to reorganize my thoughts. It's more for reorganizing my brain than what's on the page. Maybe that's the difference. I've not really articulated that before this moment. So I'm gonna make a note for myself here, and we're gonna say, like, I'm gonna use a call out and be like, new intro, some tie into Zettelkasten. Maybe Andrew's tweet is a good thing to reference too, because I think what he said is it really connected with me. I was like, yeah, I totally get. There's a lot of people that probably love the promise of a Zettelkasten, but the work isn't working. I think this might be useful for that person. I'm just gonna move some of these things around so I'm not in my own way. I don't like any of this. I'm gonna hide. Can I put this in here? Yeah, there we go. All right, so new intro on the way, probably a tie-in to Andrew's tweet some way or another. All right, let's keep reading. I got 3 sentences in and I'm already like, I hate it. Writing it's a process. So, all right, ideas, the good, the bad, the ugly. That's a pretty good headline. If you spend any time in the world of creativity or business, you know that there's a lot of emphasis on ideas. Good ideas get the green light, bad ideas get thrown out. But here's something that almost nobody talks about. Most ideas, unless they are inherently dangerous or amoral, are neither good nor bad until they are put into action. And the vast majority of ideas aren't fully formed yet. This is another cool thing about writing is, after enough time, you don't remember writing it. I don't remember writing that sentence. I love it though. I totally agree. Most ideas, unless they are inherently dangerous or immoral, are neither good nor bad until they are put into action. That's really good. Most things that we call ideas are really the incomplete phrases and thought fragments that our brains get stuck on and repeat over and over. Sometimes our ideas are really feelings, stuff we're excited about or anxious about or motivated by. Mongoose, you might be right. Amoral versus immoral. Let's find out. Both have to do with right and wrong, but amoral means having no sense of either. Good catch. Thank you much. Yeah, amoral is without morals. Good catch, good catch. So this entire framing, again, I don't remember writing this at all, but I love it. I don't know that it matches the headline, but we'll come back to that. So sometimes our ideas are really feeling, stuff we're excited about or anxious about or motivated by. Totally agree. This creates a very real world problem. We don't have ideas all at once, and we certainly don't have them in any particular order. Perhaps more importantly, we tend to feel a sense of pressure to act on our ideas immediately or not at all. This feeling of pressure is blocking your greatest work. Again, I don't remember writing this, but I love it. And I'm not saying this to compliment myself. I'm just really excited to be back in this piece, and I'm really excited to work on it and finish it. So by using a Spark file, I'm able to act on an idea simply by writing it down at the bottom of a document. Compulsion fulfilled. But unlike the process without Spark file assistance, the idea's destiny isn't written yet. It has the potential to become something greater than the idea, and I'd argue something greater than most 99.9% of all execution. Wow, that paragraph is not great. That's super confusing. I had a hard time even reading it. All right, we'll make it better. Any of your half-baked ideas can contribute to the development of better answers. So if an idea isn't good or bad, and it isn't even really an idea, what is it? My favorite part of your writing is just a great punch and let it sit with you. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that comes with practice. And it's funny to revisit some of my old, I've gone through phases with my writing. And if you look through my my own site, which is dangerouslyawesome.com, where it's mostly about like community building, co-working, some business stuff, but I've like really tuned this around the community building, co-working side of my work, or anything that I've written on Stacking the Bricks. I guess I could drag these down so you can actually see the URL. You know, I've got tons of writing in here. I've definitely gone through phases where some things are like extremely how-to-y, right? And I think the early stuff was like, here's how I did it. And it was more me like documenting my own steps. So it was like public documentation of like things I did or things I learned. Very how-to-y. And then for a time, it is like what you're saying, Prince, where it's like, I want to like almost shove you in an intellectual way, and not to like knock you down, but to like kind of shake you out of whatever mode you're thinking. And like, I'm specifically not going to tell you what to do, or I'm not going to give you explicit instructions. I'm going to like point you in a new direction. And that's some like, this seems like I'm doing both of them in one article, which is kind of fun. But yeah, no, awesome point. I appreciate that. Thank you. So let's get back here. All right, so we left off. If an idea isn't good or bad, and if it isn't even really an idea, what is it? There's a bunch of really good stuff in here, and this like section, I think it's trying to do too many things, and it's got a confusing structure to it. But if I'm trying to get to this sentence, I think we can revise this without a ton of work and make this like really, really strong. So we're gonna do that too. So we've got a new intro that ties into Zettelkasten. We've got that thing, which I think those things will weave together nicely. Now, I'm going to introduce some Steven Johnson. So, half-baked ideas and slow hunches. Steven Johnson tries to answer this question in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From. This book is a mix of stories and anthropology that looks back through periods of historical innovation and creativity and asks, what was happening in the culture that good ideas were so concentrated to this place and time? This is one of my favorite books. It's fantastic. I do recommend reading the whole book, but if you're pressed for time and want a quick primer, this video gives a great overview in about 4 minutes. And it does. In the book, Johnson coins the term slow hunch to describe an experience that almost every creative entrepreneur has experienced. It's that feeling of, there's something there, but I'm not quite sure what it is yet. Basically, a slow hunch is a nicer name for a half-baked idea. And in the periods of innovation that Johnson writes about, people with slow hunches often bumped into each other with slow hunches. Those idea fragments and otherwise half-baked ideas that collide with other idea fragments and half-baked ideas. That's not a complete sentence. Or maybe it is, I don't know. Sometimes, this is why we edit people, sometimes those two people would complete each other's ideas. They'd riff and remix. In the best cases, they'd end up with a great idea. The key lesson is that in order to have great ideas, we first need to have a way for processing and organizing our half-baked ideas. And you guessed it, that's where our Spark file comes into play. That collide with, then collide with. Oops. Those idea fragments then collide. Yes, I think you, Mongoose, I think you are correct on that edit. Thank you. See, I knew doing this with friends would be better than doing it by myself. All right, so this is where we get into the how-to-y part of this article, how to use a Spark file to have great ideas. The Spark file technique has two main parts. First, an easy and low-friction way to capture your own slow hunches, half-baked ideas, and anything else that tickles your brain. And second, a process for revisiting those half-baked ideas and helping them collide. It's like riffing and remixing on your own ideas. The first part is a habit you can start cultivating right away. The second part is something you can put in your calendar. Here's how I do mine. It's a pretty good setup. So, part 1, capture your sparks. In the early days, I started my Spark file with a plain text file that I saved to my desktop and basically always had open. If you're a pen and paper type, you could go the old-fashioned route. I just can't read my own handwriting. Still true. These days, I use a journaling app called Day One. Day One is always nearby on my phone or in the menu bar of my computer, and the two are always in sync. For me, I actually have 3 main triggers for adding something to my Spark file. The first is anytime I notice myself repeating a thought over and over in my head. This is I need to emphasize, like that's a callback to something I wrote earlier, right? I think that's an understated. Maybe I say it more here, but like I feel like that's a big deal. But the second trigger is when I find myself saying something more than once. And the third, maybe my favorite, is when I say something that really seems to land or make an impression. When any of these three triggers happen, I pull out my Spark file and add a note. Most often, it's just a few words or a phrase. Sometimes it'll be an entire paragraph or mini essay. If the words flow, I don't stop them. I also try to note the context for this entry. Is it a reaction to something else, or is it a reaction to someone else that I saw or read or watched or listened to? That info will be helpful in the future. Part of the reason I like using day one is because it automatically saves the location information to the entry and even the weather along with the day and time stamp. This meta information can be anything from interesting to useful in the second step. That's great. I think there's some things we can make clearer in here, and I think this is a really good example where like some screenshots would really zhuzh this up. But I don't know, you tell me, crew, like this part one, capture your sparks. That seems pretty clear. And is there anything that you would maybe add to it in article form? Like I said, the main thing I'm thinking is like I can probably drop that screenshot. I do this. Paste in sync. Sync. Like, I mean, other than the size of that image just being ridiculous. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Some small edits along the way, but I feel pretty good about part one. Let's move on to part two. Let's see, review your Spark file. Once a month, I scroll back and read everything I wrote into my Spark file over the last 30 days. Quick confession. For the sake of instruction, I think giving this a really rigid structure of like, I do it every 30 days, I do it every 90 days. I don't. These are like rough estimates. I think it's like useful for somebody trying to build the habit. At this point, I do it kind of when I do it based on a feeling. And I will say that over the last year, 2 years, such that it is the longest March 2020 ever, I have not done this as regularly as I used to. I guess for two reasons. One is like way less stuff was going in, so there was like less to review. And also, like, I wasn't particularly, I was in survival mode, let's be honest. So, like, I don't think this is survival work. I think this is work that you can, like, this is work towards thriving creatively. Maybe it can help pull you out of survival mode. Maybe that's part of why I'm so excited to be doing this now, too. But, I don't know, I just had that thought as I'm reading this note about doing things on such a rigid interval and being like, no, I don't. Let's see, Prince. Capturing idea makes sense. Awesome. Nick, how are you liking Notion? I thought it'd be a great fit for my squirrel brain, but I found it too nebulous. Yeah, so this is like my third or fourth venture into trying Notion, and this is the first time it stuck. And the first 3 times, too nebulous is pretty close to how I was feeling. I feel like Notion is a similar situation to, I remember the first time I used Trello, where I was like, this is awesome. but it requires a lot of setup to make work. Its power is its flexibility, and it can do so many things, but its downside is its flexibility, because you have to set it up to do, like, you have to know what you want it to do in order to do it. It's like weirdly unopinionated for being otherwise kind of opinionated software. And so like coming in with a very specific project to do, and so in our case, we're doing like internal documentation for Indie Hall in Notion. And like, that gave me a reason to be in it on a basically daily basis. And it gave me a structure as well, where like it gave me a reason to use some of Notion's like more structured tools like databases and things like that. I could do another stream at some point, perhaps, about the things that we're doing in Notion, but like a few very specific things clicked around wanting some consistency across the way we were doing things. And like, I feel like once I kind of realized the power of databases and templates in Notion, like that was the light bulb that clicked. So a little bit of a diversion, but ultimately I'm pretty excited about Notion. I've been basically doing all of my writing in it for about a month. I don't think it's good for everything, but I'm finding that living in it is better than it just being for certain things, but you have to find the right certain thing first. I don't know if that makes sense. All right, so let's get back to the review process. So once a month, I scroll back and I read everything I wrote into my Spark file over the last 30 days. Once a quarter, I read everything I wrote in the past 90 days. And once a year, I read everything I've ever written into my Spark file. Yes, everything. Today, that's going back more than 8 years. It's actually more than 10. And that is the thing that I have done. And actually, I did it fairly recently, and it was wild. Whether I'm reading the last 30 days or the whole decade long back catalog of whatever my brain has been into, I'm looking for a couple of key patterns. Number one, are there any terms or phrases that come up more than once or often? Sometimes that's me using the same term repeatedly, but more commonly it's me saying the same-ish thing many different ways. When I said I saw some cool things, it was a lot of that. If you ever heard comedians talk about how they workshop jokes in front of an audience in smaller clothes before performing on the final set of a big stage, or performing the final set on a big stage or in a TV special, this is pretty similar. I repeat myself a lot, and I bet you do too. Your Spark file is likely to help you notice what you repeat and start asking questions about why. Yes, that is a very strong section of this page. I like everything about that. Just do a little bit of formatting here. All right, number two. What do I remember from when I wrote this entry? The extra info can be helpful for jogging memory, but I'm really looking to see what I can pull from my memory rather than having complete references in SparkFile entries. This allows me to process memories and feelings that might be similar or different, seeing the entry fresh for a second or third or 20th time. Accurate. Do I have any new knowledge or resources that might make any of these half-baked ideas more possible or even more likely to succeed? 100%. That's one of my favorite parts of this. I'm working on things that I technically started working on many, many years ago sometimes. My notes for myself show some screenshots, focus on the review process, maybe an example. Why to keep Spark files separate from other note-taking tools? Homework. Okay. Looks like this is stuff that I can probably scrap. Oh yeah, no, this is definitely from the version, from the Lifehacker version. Did I really promote the masterclass then? Holy shit. Yeah. That's so, I'm not sure why that's so surprising to me. Yeah, I'd started, is there a website even up anymore? No. I have a course of sorts that I created with a couple of my colleagues, like attempting to take our community building practices and turn them into something teachable. We did that for a couple of years and then I put it on the shelf. I've revisited it recently and there's some like really good, really evergreen stuff. And there's other things that is kind of heavy-handed and overwrought and needs refreshing, but I'd love to get more of that out in the world. But I'm somehow like, this is such a weird not sequitur from this article, other than the fact that it was I guess I was using my Spark file as reference. I don't know if that's actually true or not, such that it is. All right, homework, should you choose to accept it. Read The Invention of Air, read Where Good Ideas Come From, read Steven's Spark file. I'll tell you what. I mean, yes, I think everyone should read these three things, but I think it's more important that you start a Spark file. So like giving somebody a reading assignment, especially two of them being books, before I tell them to do the thing I just taught them how to do, in hindsight, not a great plan. That's pretty funny. All right, so we're gonna completely revamp the homework. That's fine. Note, I'm using day one on my phone because it supports Markdown and syncs with Dropbox. Steven likes Google Docs, byword. All right, well, all right, well, we'll talk about tools in a minute. Here's a question for y'all. So, God, 22. Do you think it's worth me putting a note like this post originally appeared on Lifehacker, maybe up at the top? Like, in my mind, the only reason to do that is to, like, in the case of Lifehacker, is to show some credibility, if it matters to the audience. I'm not sure that it does in this case. I don't know, chat. What do you think? Should I open with something like this? A link to the original? We could. I'm just not sure that it's worth it. Johnny, you think it belongs at the end? You don't know what Lifehacker is. Also, really good point. I mean, honestly, even people who are in our audience probably don't know what Lifehacker is because Lifehacker's been like pretty dead for a long time. So, not just you. Prince, don't think it matters in this case. Yeah, I mean, this is not a critical decision. Either way, I'll leave it. At the bottom for now, and when I publish, I might decide to just rip it out entirely. Okay, cool. Thanks, gang. Ooh, we want a CTA at the end, whatever. I'm gonna get rid of this. I'm just like going through the rest of this like bottom of article scratch to see if there's anything that I might want to keep. Doesn't look like it. Where better ideas come from. That's a better title than Half-Baked Ideas and Slow Hunches, I think. Or what if it's like, better ideas come from half-baked ideas? I don't know. We'll come back to that. All right, so what we're working with here, I've got the writing process, the review process, and basically no conclusion. But this sort of lends itself to maybe be part of a conclusion. The conclusion could be kind of like the homework assignment, so to speak. I think soft recommendation, I still recommend day one for starting this. 30-day Spark File Challenge is a really good idea. And I think what I had in mind then was probably some sort of like 30-day like email sequence, like one email a week that kind of like takes you through the setup, doing of help you build the habits and stuff like that. Like some like pretty low lift, non-interruptive. Like I don't want to like hammer people's inboxes for sure, but something like I think this is a thing where if you're doing it for over the course of 30 days and in week one the goal is to like do it once or twice. In week two, the goal is to do, or week one, the goal is to do it once, right? Week two, the goal is to do it a couple times. By the end of the month, you're like jotting down Spark phone notes on a daily basis even. Maybe that's too ambitious, but something along those lines where over the course of 30 days, we ramp up as a habit. I think that'd work really well, and I get the sense people would dig it. So we might outline that a little bit. So we'll see how things go in the rest of it. All right, so we need a plan, gang. I think that, so my instinct here, I'm gonna sort of think out loud a little bit. My instinct here is we'll start at the top, right? Start at the beginning, that's where we normally start with this new intro. That's my temptation, but I'm actually thinking I might resist that temptation and jump in to somewhere in the middle. Specifically, I think if we tighten up this section, the intro will kind of present itself a little bit better. I feel like this better ideas come from half-baked ideas where I'm like basically citing my source is pretty good as it is. I think it probably needs the least work. And then the how-to part is also pretty good. I think this setup could probably be tightened a little bit. Part one, I agree, is good. Part two's also quite good. And I think the real work will be, yeah, that main sentence, the intro, and then the follow through. Okay, that's the game plan. All right, we are coming up on the top of the hour. I am going to throw up my BRB screen, grab a beverage, and come back and dive right in. So give me 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. Hang tight, talk amongst yourselves. I'm gonna put the BRB screen on and we'll be back. Okie dokie, friends. Thanks for waiting. Made myself a cup of coffee. And yeah, I feel good. I think we've got a plan. I like a plan. And we're going to get into it. So I'm going to reread this section to myself and figure out exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to turn up my music ever so slightly so you got some tunes, and I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Prince, honestly, general fault or any habit going from 0 to 100, not 0 to 1. Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're talking about the 30-day challenge. Prince, you are not alone. Pacing is hard. All right, I'm gonna dig in to this section a little bit. Like break this up mentally a little bit for myself. Cool. So, real quick, I had moved that color in good of green, bad is red over from, like, I had actually written HTML to do that in my markdown based draft of this before, and I just moved it over as I was cleaning up the doc. It's a perfect example of like a clever idea, not really adding much of anything. Like it tends to, my experience tends to be that the more clever something is, the less good it is. Cleverness is not a good proxy for good. I want to use the rule of threes to highlight 3 different ways that ideas are emphasized in the world of like creativity and business. So like the ideas versus execution, I think is the standout one. Like that's one that a lot of people say. It's almost a trope. Good ideas get the green light, bad ideas get thrown out. I don't really know if any, like, I don't know where that precisely came from. It's like, it's not wrong. But while I'm reworking this a little bit, I'm curious from the chat, are there other areas where like ideas, or there's other like tropes or sayings around ideas in creativity, business and stuff like that? What comes to mind for you? Especially stuff that is like arguably not useful or kind of annoying, but I'm interested in what comes up for you. Too many quotes. I'm quoting everything. If I'm quoting everything, I'm quoting nothing, right? Nothing stands out. Most ideas, unless they're immoral or not good or not. The going rate for ideas is 0.833 cents each, purchased in lots of 12. That's very funny. I love that. I'm going to translate it to the, I think, more common framing. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Yeah, I don't know who to cite for that particular framing, although I love it. Yeah, okay, so I like this. What other idea-centric tropes are there? I think we're gonna lean into the idea that it's not just that people talk about ideas, that there's tropes about ideas. That's like, I think, more concrete and vivid. Ideas versus execution, definitely a trope. Ideas are a dime a dozen, definitely a trope. I'm looking for one more. Maybe we can go like idea, trope. Ideas are a dime a dozen. These are pretty funny. This is not quite the question that I asked, but I really don't like Business Insider. All right, we can come back to it. We don't need to get stuck on that. Third one. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I've been doing here. So what I'm trying to do is take this section that I think had a clear point when it got to the end, but it kind of wandered to get there. I think the takeaway from this section is really to get people thinking about, well, like what an idea is as a unit, as abstract as an idea sounds like it could be. And so this showing people that like ideas are actually a multitude of things, or that there are a multitude of things that we tend to associate as ideas, and that most ideas, such that they are actually unfinished ideas. And then there's the second piece of it, which is that the audience for this is specifically people who are creative in some way or another. We have the ability to turn our ideas into something. That's our superpower, right? We possess the means of production within ourselves, whether that's doing the thing or learning. We know that we have the ability to learn new skills to do a thing. That is what I think it is to be a creative person. But that cuts both ways in that, because you I always think of the Ian Malcolm Jurassic Park quote, so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think about whether or not you should. That applies to ideas. That's like the thesis of Jurassic Park. It's just because you have an idea doesn't mean you should do it. But I think scale down from not dinosaurs, I think this applies to lots of things. It's like giving your ideas space to grow and evolve and smash into each other and become good ideas is really the core of this. And so I think just saying that out loud, I say that pressure is blocking your greatest ideas and your greatest work. That feeling of pressure to act, gets in the way of having truly great ideas. Yeah, that's it. So what do we do with unfinished ideas? Nothing need be scaled down for dinosaurs. All dinosaur. All right, this is a dinosaur metaphor stream from here on out. I'm not gonna work dinosaur metaphors into this article. And as soon as I say that, I just might. What's the Jurassic Park? Scientists. Why am I having such a hard time finding this GIF? You know what GIF I'm talking about. Anyway, distractions. So my theory, that feeling of pressure to act, the feeling of a pressure to act immediately or not at all is what gets in the way of having our best ideas. Are worth putting into action. Overstuffing. I'm trying to stuff too many ideas into one sentence is what's happening here. So, what do we do with unfinished ideas? We save them for later. That's kind of the point of this process, right? If you're anything like me, writing stuff down in a journal is a recipe for forgetting about them. Writing anything down in a journal is a recipe for forgetting about it forever. That is a very clumsy sentence. If you're anything like me, writing something down in a journal is a recipe for forgetting about that idea. Likely recipe. Ooh, here's our opportunity to tie things into the Zettelkasten. Ha. All right, so for anyone who has tuned in since we started the stream this morning, one of the things that I was explaining about this article that introduced the Spark file is I wanted to, in addition to like I mean, the end goal here is to finish it, but we've got some work to do before we get there. One of the weaker parts of this is the intro. The intro kind of like drops you into this story where I'm telling a friend about a spark file. You don't know who Tony is, you don't know what a spark file is. Unfinished ideas is the closest thing to a hook, and it's a good one, but it's not the thing. And so like, I'm not super into this intro, and the more I look at it, the less I'm into it. However, the reason that I'm returning to this particular article now is because I've been talking with a bunch of friends about, or a theme in conversations I should say, is the idea of the Zettelkasten, which for those of you who are unfamiliar is a note-taking technique, I guess you could describe it as, is a mix of a structure for entering your notes and then a structure for returning to those notes so that you can link them to each other and discover patterns and things like that. And a lot of people, including myself, appear to have a lot of enthusiasm for this technique because, at least again in theory, it makes a ton of sense, and even I will grant it that. However, as is shown in this tweet that I've embedded, which I think is the hook for this article, is someone who is a self-proclaimed Zettelkasten nerd also in the next couple of words says, being a Zettelkasten nerd in theory but failed in practice, I am keen to see this. And my hunch is that Andrew is not alone in that. People see and hear Zettelkasten. There's an entire, I know that this is big because there's an entire ecosystem of people building tools specifically for this. You've got stuff like Rome Research, people building like Rome clones, like the personal knowledge management, note-taking, second brain stuff is another one, where like a lot of this stuff speaks to the note-taking fetishists, and I'm not one of them, and if that's you, great, I'm happy for you, but this is for everyone else, if that makes sense. For me, note-taking is not about the note-taking. I get no joy from gardening my notes and linking them. I want the notes to help my brain do things that my brain does, not to, you know what I mean? So, my game plan coming into this was, before we rewrote the intro, I wanted to rewrite the problem with ideas section, which I feel like we're getting pretty close to. And then I promptly forgot that my goal with writing this before the intro is I wanted to set up the intro or tie back to the intro. This is like the first opportunity to call back to the intro. And as I'm writing this, I'm going, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I getting to? And I realized that like, you put them in a Spark file, but like, why a Spark file and not another note-taking tool? And this is my opportunity to tie it back to the Zettelkasten intro. Da, 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 da. think I lost my music. Doot, doot, doot. Let's pick a new playlist. That ought to keep us busy. Boom. All right. Oof. That was tricky. I found myself wandering with my thoughts and wanting to defend note takers or non-note takers alike. But I'm feeling really good about this. Cool. So this is going to be my tie back to the intro, where maybe I can rip on Zettelcast in a little bit more. Okay. Awesome, Johnny. Thank you for swinging by. Appreciate you being here, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Keep an eye out for the finished article on stackingthebricks.com. All right. This paragraph is not paragraph, same as that. It's like 2 sentences. Is trying so hard. You ever write a sentence that's like, like trying hard? This is one of them. It sucks, and there's like nothing redeemable about it. It's gone. So I think that the way this section ended before, where I'm trying to like redefine an idea, like I don't have to do that, because that wasn't the point of this section of the article. It's not to define ideas. It's to kind of redefine the actions that we take around ideas. So we're going to get rid of that entirely. The new problem is this section doesn't make sense where it is. So I have 2 options. One is I can find a new home for it. 2, and the more likely one, is I can get rid of it. And I think I'm gonna get rid of it. And instead, I'm going to find I'm gonna take it out here. I'm gonna put it in my create a toggle where I can hide this. I think there's some good pieces in here, and ultimately what I want to accomplish is I want to cite my source, right? I think that's really important even when I'm sharing, the Spark file is not an original idea, even though my implementation, I think, is an original. I mean, that's how there's no such thing as original anymore. Everything is a remix, right? And so because this is a remix, I believe firmly that even when you've created something, it's valuable and important to cite your sources of inspiration. I will admit that sometimes I get frustrated when I see other people who I know learned something from me doing something of their own, but not even making a mention that there was any tie to my work. And it's not even for a sense of credit. I think it's more of a like, do you know? Like, did you forget that you learned that from me? Are you trying to hide it? I don't know. I don't know why it frustrates me so much. And I don't lose sleep over it, but I try and be the change that I wish to see in this world, which means I try and cite my sources. And primary source for this entire concept is Steven Johnson, but I don't need to explain his back catalog. I don't need to explain the book. I'm not even sure if I need to I might reference the 4-minute video as a link, not an embed. We'll see. But if it gets a mention, it could be at the top or the bottom. But I don't need to figure that out now. Bottom line is it doesn't belong here. That just think about all the momentum that we're building. The problem with ideas. I've got you on board with the thing that ideas aren't actually what we think they are. Most of them are unfinished. So what do we do with unfinished ideas? We set up a Spark file, and then I create a diversion to tell you about this other author before showing you how to actually do it. That doesn't make any sense, right? So we cut it out for now. How to use a Spark file to have great ideas. How you can use a Spark file to have great ideas. My Spark file technique contains 2 habits both are specific, or both are easy, close to effortless, The only bummer about pulling out the Steven Johnson stuff is that I don't get to use the jargon slow hunches, which I really like, but do we need it? I feel like jargon has a job, and if we introduce too many bits of jargon, it can get confusing and overwhelming, and not really like it's easy to like overwhelm people with new terms for things that they already know. And so I want to try and de-jargonify. Ooh. De-jargonify. That's a mouthful. This bit. I think that means dropping slow hunches and just sticking with half-baked ideas, because people already know half-baked ideas. All right. This is another like concept that I really like from the Steven Johnson section, where the great ideas, we do need it. Maybe like a short version that focuses on, we can introduce Steven Johnson where good ideas come from, and we can introduce the idea of him like defining, if not a slow hunch, write a whole thing elsewhere. Oh, you mean like a whole other article that I can link to? Ooh, that's a good idea. That is a good idea. That'll let me get more ideas. I do think that like a little bit needs to be in here so that I can talk about the riffing and remixing piece. So I'm gonna do that. Let's see. Okay. We're getting there, though. We're getting there. Yeah. Again, it's like, what are the reasons to include this thing? How much of it do I need to include so that I can easily say this, like, riffing and remixing on your own ideas? For visiting those ideas so you can riff and remix them against your own. Slow hunches ties into chance favors a prepared mind, doesn't it? Yeah, yes. I think it's just like another dimension of it, because it's not so much about, I mean, I guess it is, you could think of it as a type of preparation. Yeah, and I guess for more context is like, I think all of Steven Johnson's work like fits into that realm of thinking as well, where it's a lot about like network theory and the resilience of networked stuff, whether that's people being networked through culture and like why we help each other besides the fact that we're hardwired for it, and like how societies are being networked makes them more resilient, and how like independence, especially American independence, is like particularly unresilient in spite of it presenting as exceptionally resilient. It is neither. So yeah, I think that's a very, very connected thought, for sure. All right. Okie dokie. I got another question for you, chat. I was playing with, so in this little piece, my spark file technique contains 2 specific parts done at different times. That's not great. 2 specific processes using a spark file. Techniques? I guess my question is like, do we call it, is it steps? Is it processes? Is it techniques? Something else? What would you call it? So whatever we have, you know, I want to outline where there's 2, I guess steps is right, but it's also not quite right. I know it sounds like I'm being pedantic here, but components is good. Components is good, Prince. I like that. Using a spark file involves practicing. Practice, we can frame this as a practice, that's good. 2 specific components. And we can call it 1 for, and then another. Phases. My only hesitation on phases is, I think it's right, but I think in my experience in teaching people through phases is people often think of phases as linear, as in a before and after, and these are more like interlinked. And I think that's maybe a thing to say, 2 interconnected phases. Phases doesn't feel quite right here. 2 interconnected techniques. They are, I think, techniques is probably the most accurate thing. Yeah, the linear bit's exactly what I was thinking about. I thought about it. Yeah, because I don't want to. It's not quite a before and after. It's more like it's like an infinite loop, because processing a spark file often generates more sparks for the future. So like infinite loop is definitely the right thing. So I'm gonna frame this, I think, as 2 techniques, and specifically call out that they are interconnected here. So we're gonna call it yes, it is cyclic, absolutely. Technique number 1, capture your sparks. Interconnected practices. I am gonna work practices in for sure. I think I'm gonna call these techniques, because I think like there's more than one way to do this. I think I'm just kind of like showing like this is a way that I do it. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna roll with this. Might come back to it. I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but choosing jargon is not easy. All right, I'm gonna get into writing here. another one of those, like, Amy rags on me all the time. I'm not consistent with, you know, is it one word or two words or capitalization and stuff like that. She catches that in my writing all the time. And so we're gonna make Sparkfile consistently 2 words. Oops. The other funny thing about Sparkfile as 1 word, my autocorrect on my phone consistently autocorrects Sparkfile as 1 word to sparkle, which is like not wrong, but like very difficult to get it to stop doing that. So yeah, that's pretty funny to me. I swore I had a section about how I used to do it in text file. Well, this is another one of those things, like the way I used to do it, does that really matter to the reader? Yeah. Probably not. 4. Although I know that Day One has done some really weird stuff in recent years. I think for like things may have gotten weird with synchronization. I actually can't remember if I pay for a subscription or not. Initially, you could just like sync a file with Dropbox. I'm pretty sure that's what I still do. Like what I don't want to do is send people to use a tool that is going to, yeah, it looks like I'm paying for it. And that's annoying. Oh well. How much is Day One? $3 a month. I'm gonna go so far as to say it's worth it. Is that pay required for sync? Yeah. Yeah, $3 a month. Necessary? No. Worth it? Yes. In my opinion. Don't steal my passport number. Whoops. All right, here. This up here. Do I have to buy the app too? No, it's free to use. It's a free app with just the subscription. I was like trying to avoid a situation where like, here's an awesome thing you can do, and it costs $10 or something like that. You can use this on your phone out of the gate for free. Got it. Didn't I just say 2 words? Here's a question. I have an affiliate program? Looks like no. All right. does it do? Yeah. Alright. I think we're getting there. I'm gonna do that. And that. So it is a little after 12, gang. Here's what I'm thinking. I think I'm gonna break for the day, but I want to leave myself some notes. Remember, leaving notes for future self. When I come back, rather than continuing into part 2, I want to work on the intro. Right? I feel really good about basically everything that starts from the problem with ideas down through the first step and now this little software recommendation, like, call out basically. I feel good about all of that. Needs an intro, and I feel like once the intro is good, then I can get back to finishing up part 2, homework conclusion, and we're gonna be done. I'll do that on the next stream. But this has been good. This has been really fun. It feels really good to get back into this article. It feels really good to be on stream. I super appreciate all of the notes and feedback and edits and suggestions and things like that in the chat. We'll see how the weekend goes. I might do another stream this weekend to finish up this article. It won't be next week because I'm on vacation next week. I'm the person who's coming back to stream and then going on vacation. Nah, I'm headed on vacation next Wednesday. So next weekend you will not see me, but I think you're gonna see me at least once more before I go on vacation, because I would like to finish this article before I go on vacation. I feel really good about it. Yeah, appreciate y'all hanging out. And, you know, I think in general, I've got a lot of writing related projects. I'd like to be doing this more. I don't know if I'll do it for all of them, but I'm always curious, like what parts of the writing process you'd like to be able to see. This is sort of like a revising version. Maybe we can jump into something that's a little earlier. I've got a ton of stuff. We also talked about, I'll do a Notion stream at some point, perhaps. And yeah, any other ideas for stuff like this? Super open to it. But for now, I think I'm gonna roll out and enjoy the rest of my Saturday. I hope you all do the same. Later.